John Pruitt, president of Kingdom Exploration. I'm going to delve into the labyrinth of geopolitical tensions and economic sanctions that have ensnared the global stage, focusing on the latest round of punitive measures against Russia and the looming specter of their impact on global oil supply and prices. As nations grapple with the implications of these sanctions, the fear of jeopardizing energy security and propelling oil prices to dizzying heights has taken center stage. Here are the key points we'll go over. I'm going to talk about the introduction of the new sanctions that was just recently imposed today. Well, they're discussing them. Indirect oil purchases, shadow fleets, and evasion tactics, shifting global oil markets, impact on global oil prices, the EU's legal loopholes, economic implications for Russia, global witness reports, and calls for actions with the EU. And so the over 500 new sanctions have been announced by the U.S. against Russia, targeting its defense, financial sectors, and individuals directly involved with the Navalny case. These measures aim to further isolate Russia economically and cripple its military capabilities. So Biden is following up with this promise that there would be severe consequences if Putin kills Navalny. Indirect oil purchases, despite an EU ban on Russian oil, loopholes have allowed them for indirect purchases worth billions, sustaining Russia's oil revenue and indirectly funding its military ambitions. So they're going to work on shutting down those loopholes. Russia's use of shadow fleets to circumvent sanctions and sell oil to nations like India and China highlights the challenges of enforcing global sanctions and the innovative methods employed by Russia to maintain its oil exports. And this is something that the 500 new sanctions is going to be working on. With sanctions disrupting traditional routes, Russia has pivoted towards Asian markets, fundamentally altering the landscapes of global oil trade and increasing reliance on alternative suppliers. So these 500 new sanctions, their focus is to eliminate Russia's places where he could export oil skirting these sanctions. The sanctions, coupled with Russia's evasion tactics, threaten to reduce the global oil supply, stoking fears of rising oil prices and increased energy insecurity worldwide. And so when you put these severe sanctions on Russia, reducing the oil flow, because Russia has 3.5 million barrels a day that they export. And they do it in a way using shadow fleets, and they're selling to countries that just ignore the sanctions. And America is going to take it to the next level, trying to reduce these loopholes, shadow fleets, and whatnot, because they are becoming more desperate because they're seeing the effects of not doing anything about Russia and not severely disrupting their income. And also with what's happening to Iran, the same thing. The Biden administration is realizing that if they don't start cutting oil exports from these countries that are causing wars, at some point they're going to grow to a level that we cannot contain it anymore. So they have to do something, and that's what they're doing here. The exploitation of legal loopholes for importing Russian oil through third countries underscores the complexities of sanction enforcements and the need for tighter controls. Despite sanctions, Russia's economy has shown resilience, with oil revenues buoying its GDP, enabling continued military spending, raising questions about the effectiveness of the economic sanctions. A report by Global Witness emphasizes the significant revenue Russia continues to generate from oil, challenging the global community to reassess the efficiency of sanctions and the mechanisms of enforcement. Okay, so they're going to find new ways to enforce these sanctions. They're actually taking it seriously. Up until now, they've turned a blind eye to Russia skirting the sanctions, Iran skirting the sanctions. Why? Because lower oil prices keeps the left in office. Because a huge selling aspect from the other party, Trump, is look at the economy, look at oil prices. The greatest thing that impacts inflation, the economy in a negative way, is high oil prices. So by sanctioning Russia and Iran, what does it do? It increases the price of a barrel of crude, making the right correct. And so to prevent this from happening, they turned a blind eye. Well, they can't turn a blind eye any longer, not because of what is happening as far as Russia and Iran being able to sell oil. It's more about politics. It's more about their polls. It's they're not going to get back in office if they don't fix the problem. So Biden is telling the world, look, I'm making good on my promise. I threatened Putin and I said, hey, if you kill Navalny, I'm going to enforce more sanctions. And here he is doing it. But if he stops at words and Russia continues to enrich themselves from selling oil in Iran as well, it's going to make him look very bad. So hopefully they're going to do something about it. And listen, at the end of the day, you look what is happening in the Middle East. I mean, Iran has become more provocative. The Houthi rebels are attacking ships in the Red Sea. You look at the Hezbollah is dropping bombs in Israel. I mean, the Iran's proxies have emboldened themselves and they've become very provocative. And this is because they're able to do this because of the oil money, Russia's attacks as well. And so we're sending all this money to Ukraine, and the polls say, hey, we strongly disagree. So instead of going broke by trying to fund an endless war, and instead of potentially us having to get involved in expanding our wars, it makes more sense to cut Russia off from the very funding source of their war, as well as Iran. So they're finally waking up to the ideas that the right had already, and they're learning why they should have done this in the first place. Okay, and so I truly believe that these sanctions are going to be real this time versus a slap on the wrist. And so discussions are underway to close legal loopholes and exemptions that allow Russian oil to enter the EU market, signaling a potential shift in strategy to more effectively cut off Russian oil revenue. So the interplay of sanctions, oil markets, and geopolitical strategies presents a precarious situation for global energy security. As the world navigates this volatile landscape, the potential for rising oil prices and the implications for global economies and energy security remain at the forefront of international discourse. So I'm here to tell you, the Middle East, it's turning into a major war. It's turning into a regional war. Everyone was concerned about this escalating to a regional war. Well, it has. It is increasing. It's escalating. Iran is sending in more military presence, weapons and military presence in Yemen, in Syria, in different parts of the Middle East. They're preparing. They're preparing for a serious war. And Putin, how do you think he's going to react to these new sanctions? He is going to up the ante. And at the end of the day, oil is on the line. This is going to greatly exacerbate the price of a barrel of crude. And the reason why they've formed a BRICS to come together, they're coming together because they're tired of the West controlling oil. They're tired of knowing that if they do something that America disagrees with, their ability to sell oil will be reduced. Imagine if somebody in the Middle East had the ability to reduce your company from selling the very product that provides for your family and for your city. You would be pissed, especially if it's another country that has a different religion, different way of life. You wouldn't like it. And so Iran and Russia and Saudi Arabia included, the UAE, none of these countries like the fact that America is the world police dictating the parameters of their lives. And so they formed BRICS Alliance to bypass the US dollar and to control their circumstances, their country, and their oil. Because every time a barrel of oil is bought and sold from exports, it's enriching America because it's done in US dollar. It's done using the US SWIFT system, which is how money travels across the nations. And they're tired of making America richer from selling their products, their oil. And so Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, they all want to use their own currency because it empowers their currency, making it more valuable. And everybody wants to be America. Everyone wants to have the ability to print and to spend like America does. And we're the only country that can, because our currency is the most widely traded currency in the world. And we had forgotten that it was Saudi Arabia that made our currency powerful in the beginning, because we made a deal with, under Richard Kissinger, we made a deal with Saudi Arabia to sell our oil, their own oil in U.S. currency. So every time any country in the world bought Saudi oil, which they were the biggest distributor of oil at the time, they had to do it in U.S. currency, causing all of these sales of commodities done in U.S. dollar, making our dollar the most powerful currency in the world. The only fiat currency that has ever lasted historically this long is the U.S. dollar. We've turned our backs on the Middle East on how we've gotten to this point. And so they're taking matters in their own hands, and they're shifting oil sales from our dollar to their own currency. So what is that going to do? Detaching the U.S. dollar from a barrel of crude is going to put us in the same position every other country is in, and oil prices for us will be more expensive because we trade dollars for oil versus oil being attached to the dollar. So now if oil prices will have actual inflation attached to it now going forward. Before, inflation doesn't really affect the price of a barrel of crude. That's why when we have inflation, oil prices don't go up that much, where for everyone else, it's more expensive because they're trading their currency for U.S. dollars and they're buying oil. So the inflation happens when they transfer their currency to the greenback, to U.S. dollar. That's where inflation happens. It doesn't happen when they buy and sell their oil, because their oil is worth whatever the value of that is worth. That's why people buy gold to protect their dollars. Oil is value is not based upon what the value of their currency. It's based upon whatever the spot price is. So even if inflation is crazy, let's say Iran's country, they have inflation 10 times overnight. Well, that means the price of a barrel of crude exported is worth 10 times more. And so if they have to convert their dollars to USD, they're going to get hit pretty hard, as where if they just sell their oil directly. Okay. And so it's a bold step for the Middle East. They're preparing for something. And so this is going to greatly reduce the value of dollar over time. All right. And so the price of a barrel of crude will go up, not just with sanctions because they're reducing the global oil supply, but also because of inflation for the very first time. So I truly believe gold prices and crude and commodity prices are going up for that reason. Okay. And so moving forward, this BRICS is not just representing bypassing the US dollar. It's also an organization of 40% of the world's oil supplies. The groups control 40% of the world's oil supply. You put a group from the Middle East that is tired of the West controlling them, controlling the narrative, and you put them in control of 40% of the world's oil supply. That is not good news for the West, because all they have to do is reduce the amount of oil available to the West. And that will put us in a position to where local oil prices will go to very high levels. I truly believe that this is what they're planning, because they're tired of being controlled. They're tired of being sanctioned. They're tired of Wall Street controlling the price of a barrel of oil. Imagine you are OPEC plus and you reduce the amount of oil you're outputting to help push oil prices higher. So now you're selling less product, you're losing market share, but you are empowering America, their shell companies, and make even more money just for the big three that control 70% of the markets, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, just to sell off their futures, undermining what OPEC has done. And so they're in the same situation they were before, but they're making less money and they're selling less oil, and the price of a barrel of crude remains. So they're going to do whatever it takes to OPEC. Middle East is going to do whatever it takes to undermine America as America has undermined them. And the Middle East, the wars are breaking out even more. These sanctions are going to cause even more turmoil. And I truly believe that this time it's going to work. It's going to be more effective, because Biden administration can't afford not to reduce oil sales by Russia, and I think Iran's going to be following up. I think it's going to reduce in the short term. I think we're going to see a reduction of 100 to 250,000 barrels of oil a day, and it continues to grow to a potential level of 2 million barrel a day reduction. Demand for oil is growing. I don't care what they're saying out there. I would trust OPEC and their numbers. They've been more accurate than the EIA, Energy Information Administration, who's being funded by people that hate oil. And you have to open up your eyes to really see what's happening here. The push for green energy, it may seem like it's a good thing, but at the end of the day, green energy is very evasive to our country. It enriches China, and it's not going to work. If you look at the numbers, and numbers are very hard to come by because they're hiding it. They don't want you to know the truth about it. And if you had all green energy technology, one EMP would take everything out, reducing your ability to drive. So, all right, guys, I'm Sean Pruitt, president of Kingdom Exploration. If you like this channel, please subscribe. If you're interested in investing in oil and gas, please look in the description below. I could teach you more. We'll talk soon. Thanks.